N2 is the limit of where you want your naps to go. So, right? So that's why we recommend that naps don't go longer than 20 minutes or 25 minutes, like less than 30.
Because so half an hour max.
Right. Because at half an hour, you start to go into the next stage of sleep. But at N2, this is where you're going to get that power nap, right? And won't experience that sleep inertia, that, grogginess.
I just woke up and I'm lost.
Yeah, that you would get with a longer nap.
Hi, it's Jeremiah, and welcome to the Wake Up Call podcasts, brought to you by the Polysleep studio. Sheryl, first episode of the Wake Up Call. How do you feel?
Pretty good. Excited about this. How about you, Jeremiah?
I'm great. I slept like a baby actually yesterday.
You did?
I'm quite excited for our first episode together. So today we're not going to go too down the rabbit hole because we have so many new other episodes and guests that are going to come. But what I wanted to talk about today with you is really, and help the audience understand what is a good night's sleep and how to get one.
Okay.
Because as we said in our intro, I think it's 1 Canadian out of 3 or more than 10 million people in Canada that don't sleep properly. And that's a big number. And my first question to you is, do people even realize they don't even have a good night's sleep?
In my opinion, no. I mean, when people think about sleep, they might be thinking about, for instance, insomnia or something like a disorder like sleep apnea, etc. But I would say that sleep deprivation, a lot of it lifestyle related, is what people are experiencing. In fact, if I even look at my own experience, right, before I got into sleep and sleep coaching and even the research part of it, I just knew that ever since I was a child, I was tired. First of all, I'm a night owl, right? So that means I had to wake up early, and this is genetic, right? So growing up.
What's the definition of a night owl? So for maybe dudes who don't know what it is.
A night owl is a person who's an evening type, meaning that you tend to go to bed later than other people relative to your peers, right? And the reason for that is because it seems to be genetically determined. So you inherited it some way. It's not something that you can actually say, hey, I'm going to stop being a night owl. You just are, just like some people are morning people. And then there are a whole group of intermediate types in between, right? And the 9 to 5 world is really something that for those intermediate types, they're the 9 to 5ers. And the morning types tend to do better with them as well because it coincides with the work day, right? It's the night owls like me who we are struggling a little bit more.
So that's interesting that you mentioned that because, I always pick on my girlfriend because she's like tired every morning. And I'm like, yeah, but you went to bed at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's where I'm efficient. I'm like, yeah, but that's your choice. And from what you're saying, it's not necessarily or entirely her choice.
It isn't.
Interesting.
It's actually determined by your circadian rhythm. And so that the circadian rhythm so sleep, right? Sleep is determined. The time you go to sleep is determined by a couple of different things. But there's a theory that there are 2 things that affect sleep. One is your homeostatic sleep pressure, and the other is your sleep-wake drive, your circadian rhythm. So both of these in concert kind of work together. So imagine that your sleep pressure is you wake up in the morning and you have a certain amount of energy. Let's just call it energy.
Okay, yeah.
All right?
So you're at 100%.
Yeah, you're at 100%. Okay. You're feeling great. That, by the way, is not how night owls work, but morning people, you have a certain amount, and then over time you get more tired.
Okay,
right?
You get depleted.
Yes, and this is your pressure to want to fall asleep, your propensity to fall asleep, right?
Okay.
And then you have, on the other end, your wake drive, right? So imagine that you have this rhythm, this internal clock that runs at a certain schedule. Now, some internal clocks or circadian rhythms are longer than others and some are shorter. They approximate 24 hours, which is the sun. And that's why it's so important to actually get sun, because this will entrain your internal clock to the sun, right? And so the good part here is that we all kind of we can all have a society where we can live together and actually work together because we have this pattern. But some people who are on the longer end, like night owls, will tend to sleep later in the evening, right? That's just how it works. And if I wish I had a graph here that I could share with you, essentially there is a window of opportunity for you to fall asleep. And it's when your sleep drive, your pressure to want to go to sleep is at its biggest, and your wake drive, your circadian rhythm, is at its lowest.
Okay.
Right? And that's your sleep opportunity. Now, imagine that someone who has a shorter circadian rhythm, that sort of, imagine that this is their propensity to stay awake.
Stay awake or
right?
be tired.
Exactly, or be tired. They're going to actually have that sleep opportunity earlier in the evening.
Okay.
Right? And a person who has a longer rhythm will fall asleep later in the evening because it's where those two lines meet.
It's funny
right?
that you mentioned that because I'm sure and the audience and
or
people
interact.
can relate to that.
Yeah.
It's, when you're sometimes super tired and you're like, oh, I could fall asleep right away. But half an hour later, because you had something else and all, you're like, oh, damn it, I lost it. I'm not tired anymore. Is that basically part of that or
maybe not. Could be, but it could also be other factors as well. Okay. So typically people will have a dip sometime in the afternoon. Yeah. For night owls, it might be later on, sometimes in the evening, right? And then you feel this little bit of energy, right? So it's not like your wake drive is and your sleep drive are consistent throughout the day. It's not. It's sort of like you wake up, then around 2:00 you have that afternoon dip, right? Where you want to just sort of after lunch, then you need that 3:00, 2:00, 3:00. You feel a little tired, and then you get a little bit of more energy. Yeah. And then in the evening, you want to go to bed, right? Now, for the night owls, it's just shifted a little later, right? But here's the thing. Yes, that plays a role, but there are other factors. For instance, light, right? We're surrounded by light. All of this can play a factor in jumpstarting you at night, especially if you're a night owl, right? If you are a person, though, who's more of a morning lark, so a morning lark, by contrast, they are the people who by 7 or 8, they're wiped out. They want to actually go to bed by 9, right? Which for me, I'm like, are you kidding? I just got a boost of energy. I'm ready to go and work at night now, right?
You see, it's funny because I admire these people. I'm like, they wake up so early, they do so much things, and then at 10, they go to bed, and to me, they look more productive. But in reality, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
But by standards with our society, like you were saying, because we're conditioned to work 9 to 5, there's this perception that they're more efficient because they start their day earlier. But ultimately, it's all about how you manage your agenda.
It's how you manage your agenda, but there's also the issue that there are constraints that you have in terms of when do you start work. So if your work is at 9:00 in the morning, then and you as a night owl want to stay up later, well, then you have to learn to adjust that. And like I said, it would be better to actually stick with your own internal schedule because your sleep is actually optimized when you're working with your internal clock. But if you need to advance your sleep phase, there are ways to do that. There are ways to do that. And meanwhile, all those morning people who can't seem to get to a movie or a dinner or socialize because they just want to go to bed, then, there are ways to work with them too. And pretty much that functions with light, dark, light, dark, melatonin. There are a whole bunch of different things that you can do. You can even go for treatment for that. But there are things you can do without going for treatment as well. But I know that we're going to actually be talking about this in another episode, right?
And actually, I want to bring back the conversation to the original question, which was, so we know so many people have issues with their sleep. Mm-hmm. Most of them don't even actually realize it. So let's go back to the basic. What is, by definition, a good night's sleep? How long should it be? And how should you feel after that? Okay,
so a good night's sleep should be typically between 7 to 9 hours a night for an adult, right? Wow. Yes. Okay. Most people sleep for much less than that, right? So around 6 hours, and I think it was 6 hours and 45 minutes, 6 hours and 30 minutes, something to that effect. And the people I talk to who, have issues with sleep, they sometimes sleep for 5-6 hours. And the weirdest part is some of them actually think that it's normal, or thought it was normal. But it's when people start to feel tired. It's when people start to feel the pain of not falling asleep. That's when they start seeking help sometimes. It is sleep is tricky though, because you can be sleep deprived, and after a while, you start to think it's normal, just like I had shared earlier.
So your body adjusts to it. We're incredible machines that adjust to a lot of things.
Yes.
Even though we shouldn't adapt to that, from my understanding and our society, people get used to be sleep deprived and work around that.
Right. So if you were to look at their actual sleep, like scientifically study how they're sleeping, you will actually notice that they're sleep deprived, but they themselves, after a certain amount of time, may not think they are. And you can see this in terms of their performance, right? So things like memory, reflexes.
It probably impacts everything.
Everything. Rise in cortisol levels. Appetite. Leptin, ghrelin.
I got a question for that actually a bit, probably later on. I'm going to touch on that.
And I'm going to just go back and answer some of your questions. You asked me what is good, how long people should sleep for. But also, I think you had asked...
what's a good night's sleep?
What's a good night's sleep? Well, a good night's sleep means that you're cycling through the different stages of sleep, which all work together in concert together to restore your body and your cognitive function, as well as emotional regulation, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think we realize this because we all know that when we don't sleep well, the next day we don't feel great.
True.
We're snappy, we're moody, we're not really good to be around. And it's really interesting. There was a research article that was done, and it was, they were looking at how people perceived other people when they were sleep deprived. So they showed people, it turns out that when they showed people pictures, the expression on that face was pretty neutral, but those who were sleep deprived viewed the face as being more in a more threatening manner than someone who wasn't sleep deprived.
That's interesting.
Right? So imagine what that'd be like. Imagine what it'd be like working in customer service.
Yeah, I mean,
or retail or anywhere, and then you're like sleep deprived, and then
Yeah, being snappy, it's definitely something. And, I can relate to that.
Yes.
If I don't sleep well for a couple of days, I'm very short-tempered. And a lot of little things can trigger me and I'm surprised myself. So I think a lot of people in the audience and myself can relate to that. And which leads me to another question about that. You were talking about sleep cycle. We probably will go further down in that. And I was really thinking about that recently because tech helps us a lot. We have these Apple Watch and so many things, and we're going to have a full episode dedicated to that. But what are these cycles and what would be a good baseline? Because I know there's a couple of them. There's some, like, I think the REM cycle, which is shorter but very important. So that scientifically defines what's a good night's sleep. What are, if we could boil it down to, very simple points that people should remind themselves, because that's the only way of measuring if you have a good night's sleep or not.
Right. Okay. So wait, do you want me to tell you about all the different stages, or do you just want a really good tip on whether or not you're falling asleep? Like, kind of say to yourself, okay, I think this is showing me that I need to actually take care of my sleep.
Yeah, I mean,
both.
What would be a good trigger for some people to understand first that I'm sure some people were not necessarily aware of what their sleep stages are, and I don't want to go too much, details.
Yeah.
But is there any specific elements, or like you said, being snappy definitely is a sign that you don't sleep well. But what are these stages and how important they are?
Okay, so before that, let me just give a quick sign. You know what? I used to think that those people who, when they went to bed and fell asleep right away, okay, we're not talking about people who have insomnia. That's a different issue. But I used to think a good sleeper was someone who, as soon as they lay their head on their bed, on their pillow, and were lights out, that was good. It's actually a sign of sleep deprivation. Did you know that?
Oh, so I might be sleep deprived still, because I'm someone who it takes me 5 minutes when I'm in my bed to fall asleep usually.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I didn't knew that.
No, all right.
I didn't.
So it usually takes 15 minutes for the average person who's not sleep deprived to fall asleep. 15 to 20.
Okay.
At 30 minutes or longer. And if you do this 3 times a week over a period of time, and then that's potentially a sign of insomnia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Only 30 minutes would be already.
Yeah. But if you, like I said, so if you are sleepy during the day, you shouldn't really be sleepy during the day, right? If it's chronic fatigue, chronic sleepiness, then, you may want to take care of your sleep. Either you're sleep deprived and it's a lifestyle issue, or you could have sleep apnea, or insomnia or some other sleep disorder out there, right?
Okay.
So these are things to think about. So that's a really good
benchmark.
Yeah. Yes.
If you're sleepy during the day, that is definitely not. It should not be the case.
Yes.
Okay.
Although, like I said, there is that afternoon dip that people experience, and that is more or less normal. In some places we used to take siestas during that period.
True.
But typically, you don't need to. You wouldn't be needing to nap all the time, right? You'd have more energy, that's for sure. So I would say those are some things to look out for. Snappiness. Are you hungry all the time?
Memory, like you mentioned.
Memory.
Too. Okay.
So things like that. So remember I talked about hunger.
Yes.
So that is, do you find that you're hungry all the time? Because if you're not sleeping well, it touches upon leptin and ghrelin, which control your appetite. When you're sleep deprived, what ends up happening is the leptin, which tells your body basically, hey, I'm full, doesn't get released.
Okay.
But imagine that you have a tap, and so that stays off or relatively low. And then on the other end, you have your ghrelin, that's your I'm hungry kind of thing, where I'm hungry and I need to eat, and that's turned way up.
Interesting.
Right? And you don't have the leptin coming in to counteract it, and the ghrelin is really just overtaking your appetite, and you're like, I need to eat. And no matter how much you eat,
You'll still probably be hungry. So that kind of debunks some sayings where I've heard back in the days people saying, oh, he don't sleep as much, but he compensate because he eat a lot more and he eat well. So that has nothing to do with it. It's probably actually because he's not sleeping enough that he tried to compensate because he's hungry all the time.
Yeah, there's something to that. Yeah, there's definitely a relationship between appetite and also food choice. So they did studies, and it was really interesting to notice that those people who were sleep deprived, if you laid out a table before them and you put vegetables, fruits, cakes, chips, everything, those who were sleep deprived actually ended up choosing high fat, high sugar, high salty foods.
Does it have anything to do with kind of dopamine and habits? Because ultimately in our society nowadays, we unfortunately became dopamine junkie. Everything from every activity we do and every food we eat and everything, it's all about instant gratification. And that leads to, generally speaking, very poor habits that we tend to have to fight, in different means and way. And that actually leads me to the next thing I wanted to ask you is, habits definitely and probably have a huge impact on the quality of your sleep. And is there anything we should do or we should not do to have proper sleeping habits?
Okay, so there are a couple of things there. So you were talking about dopamine.
Yeah.
Okay, and the choices that people made.
Yeah.
Potentially, what I would say is that, I'm not looking at the research here, but I would say that if I'm sleep deprived, well, there's a matter of what will make me feel and, emotional eating, right? So there's a couple of different things going on. You have the appetite issue with leptin and ghrelin. That's out of whack. And then at the same time, you're also thinking to yourself, okay, well, you know what? If I'm not feeling so great because my emotions are all over the place, some people like to have a chocolate bar, right? So if you have a chocolate bar, you're like, that's good. So yeah, I'm sure there's part of it that's related to that.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that we didn't quite answer the previous question, which was the difference between N1, N2, N3, and the different stages of sleep, right? You really have different stages of sleep that you cycle through. Now, what we start off with is N1. So N1 is the lightest stage of sleep. So what that means is you're entering sleep. But if I were to wake you up at that time, let's say, I'm sure a lot of sleep-deprived students have experienced this, where they're in N1, right? So you tap someone on the shoulder and you say, hey, did you just fall asleep? And they'll tell you, actually, no. They actually don't think that they were sleeping. But if you were to check out their brain waves, you'd notice that they were actually at that stage. It's also a stage where you experience hypnagogic hallucinations, which are sort of like mini dreams. So did you ever notice that when you're drifting off to bed, your mind begins to wander? Mm-hmm. And sometimes like these weird images start to come into mind.
Daydreaming, right?
Right, daydreaming, something like that. Well, that's part of the sleep onset stage. Right. And we're going to get into that actually when we have one of our guests come in, because he's going to get into that pretty well. And I know because I worked on his theory and his app and at the with Simon Fraser and University of Montreal. So we had studied that a little, and actually not a little, a lot, but essentially that's that stage, N1. N2 is a light stage. It is a light stage of sleep as well, but here you clearly are aware that you have fallen asleep. So at this point, if I were a teacher and a student falls asleep in my class, and I were to tap him on the shoulder, and I'd be like, "Hey, you were sleeping." If the person's being honest, they'd say, yeah, sorry. You know what I mean? So that's the difference. N2 is the limit of where you want your naps to go. So, right? So that's why we recommend that naps don't go longer than 20 minutes or 25 minutes, like less than 30.
So half an hour max.
Right. Because at half an hour, you start to go into the next stage of sleep. But at N2, this is where you're going to get that power nap, right? And won't experience that sleep inertia, that, grogginess. I
just woke up and I'm lost.
Yeah, that you would get with a longer nap. So at N2, there is an interesting thing that starts to happen. They're beginning to notice this in the research. So let's say I give you a list of things to remember. Oh, okay, like this, like a script, and or I don't know, just a list. And I say, hey, learn it, right?
Yeah. Which is
We
quite
have
hard.
right. We have. I keep on hitting things, but we have a limited capacity to learn certain things, right? Now, when you take a nap, it frees up space for you to learn more. So imagine your brain like a computer. You have temporary storage and permanent storage.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're going into N2, they're starting to realize that it frees up some space for you to learn more. Imagine that.
So that's a good tip for the students out there.
Students, but not only students, everybody has to learn, especially in this day and age,
Yeah.
right? So, people at work.
That 20-minute
Everywhere.
power nap can actually improve efficiency and give you that little boost of energy without making you feel like you woke up from a long slumber and you're completely lost.
Yes.
So, okay.
Especially if you're sleep deprived. Now, if you're not sleep deprived, chances are you won't necessarily need a nap.
True.
But that's also going back to, why do you need sleep? Well, if you have a good night's sleep, you have more capacity to learn, to make better decisions. So it's not only your physical health and your appetite, it's also, or emotional regulation, I think we talked about that, but it's also your capacity to learn and perform.
True.
Right? So that's N2. We then go into N3. So this is deep sleep. Now this is like slow wave sleep, right? This is where your body is repairing itself. This is where your brain is repairing itself. It's resting. I don't know if I would say repair, but this is where you're actually resting and it's starting to, gear up for the next day. After that, so it's obviously very important. And then after that, you have REM. And so REM is one of those that I think everybody knows about because there was Inception. There are a lot of movies we talk about REM sleep all the time, right? It's dreaming. This is when the majority of your dreaming happens. And at REM, there seems to be this an interesting fact. I'm not going to go all academic and talk about every single thing, but an interesting fact about REM is it seems to have a relationship with emotional regulation, dealing with issues that you've experienced during the day. So that people who have REM, right, who experience REM and have a good amount of it, actually end up being able to handle their, emotionally challenging issues better.
Wow.
Right? So that's where the mood part comes in. And so you have all of these different aspects. Now, I'm not going through everything. And obviously, things like memory consolidation, learning, all of these things, there are many different stages involved with that. But that's just a quick overview.
Yeah. So these 4 stages are the baseline. And like you said, I think everybody know about REM. And we somehow, for some reason, know how important it is. Is there a way to optimize that? And that goes back to the question I asked, that we went back and now we're going back to it, which leads to habits. So these stages are important. And when we talk about 7 to 9 hour, that includes every stage there, right? Because we cycle through them from my understanding.
Right. So just so we clarify how it works, it's not that you have N1, N2, N3, and N4 over the 7 or 8 hours, and it's like blocks of time. No, they are cycles, like you said. And each cycle, they tend to get longer as the night progresses. So maybe the first couple of cycles are like 70 to 100, and then the later cycles are around 90 to 120 minutes, right? But there's an interesting relationship between slow wave sleep and REM. So at the beginning of the night, you get more slow wave sleep. Towards the end of the night, you get more REM. And where REM is you get more REM at the expense of slow wave sleep. So imagine that N1 and N2 are relatively consistent, right? In terms of how much time it takes for them. But slow wave sleep starts off as taking more time than REM does. And then towards the end of the night, it switches. So if you are cutting off your sleep, let's say you're only sleeping for 5 hours or 6 hours a night, you're not getting as much REM as you need, right?
Which brings back to being cranky. That's an emotional response.
Yes, it is. It is.
In a way. So that REM stage is important.
It is obviously so important on so many different levels. But if you're not getting enough, that's an issue too. And, you were saying that you have sleep apnea, right?
Yeah. So that's one thing I wanted to touch on, because we talked about it outside of when we were starting recording that podcast. But yes, I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea for a couple of years now. I think over 7 years now. But it is due to the fact that I was diagnosed with hyper blood pressure first. And the doctor just, like anybody, prescribes me pills. And I thought well, that's genetic. It's in the family. Cool. I got hyper blood pressure, bad lottery. A couple of years forward, I've met a cardiologist that suggested, because I was snoring a little bit, you should do some sleep apnea test to see if maybe you don't suffer from it, because that can have a tremendous impact on your blood pressure. And I was like, sleep apnea? What, really? So I did the test, and I couldn't believe it myself. I had severe sleep apnea, which is why I started using a CPAP. And I don't take hyper blood pressure pills anymore because it got under control. But more importantly, when I started using the CPAP and I got used to it after a couple of weeks, I realized how bad my sleep was. It was like, oh my God, I finally know what it is to have energy. So yeah, it's crazy. Like you said, how a disorder like that can impact every single aspect of your life.
Right. So this brings me to my REM question.
Yeah.
So before you were diagnosed, before you had CPAP, you were using a CPAP machine, did you dream? Do you remember having dreams? Because usually,
that's a good question. I mean, here and there, yes, you'll remember the goofy one, but dreaming, generally speaking, was not something I remember. Now that you mention it, I can remember probably a lot more often my dreams than I was before.
Right. Because one of the questions people ask in reference to sleep apnea is, do you dream? So I work with other sleep experts, and I work with people who've actually, who are in the medical field as well, or researchers. And one of the questions that they do ask to determine whether a person has sleep apnea is, do you dream? And so if people don't remember their dreams, they're not getting as much REM, right? Okay, obviously we're not going to remember every dream, but some of us, many people do remember something that they do dream.
True.
So it's really interesting. That's why I asked you that question. There was another part to your question, though. I remember, or not this question, but from a couple of minutes ago. What were you saying? You were saying something about sleep habits.
Yes. So ultimately, right now we've discussed elements that people can probably, relate to in their life as to, like you said, are you dreaming? Are you cranky? How many hours do you sleep? Are you snoring? Do your partner tell you you're snoring, right? Is there something on a daily basis that wake you up at night? Could be your dog, could be your cat. So all these triggers are definitely a good way to diagnose if you do properly sleep or not. But now the next question is, it's related to habits. And we do have certain level of control. And as hard as it is to create or break habit, I don't even think you can break habit. These neural paths are engraved so deep in people's brain, but you can create a new one. And that's actually one thing we at Polysleep, we're trying to do is when you change your mattress, it's often tied to a life event. So life events are a great way to create new habits. And I was asking you basically, what would be the best habit people could try to create to improve their sleep?
Oh, you know what? The first thing, have a sleep schedule. Make sure that you keep consistency in terms of the time you go to bed and the time you wake up. Our bodies really like that consistency. Like I said, we have a rhythm. We run on rhythms.
Yeah.
It's not even just one circadian rhythm. Like every cell has its own rhythm or pattern, right? So you want to maintain that consistency. So definitely set a realistic time when you can go to bed.
Okay.
And a realistic time when you can wake up in relation to your life activities, right? And make sure that you keep that consistent not only during the week, but on the weekends as well, because people sleep in on the weekends or they stay up later than they normally would. And that really causes havoc in terms of your sleep patterns. And so that's what you want to avoid. So if you were to ask me, what's the number one thing that people need to do is they have to keep a consistent sleep schedule.
Okay. So, and that's what would be the definition or the perfect effective sleep routine? Like you said, if you're an early or a morning night type of person, you probably will decide to go to bed earlier than, like in your case, being a person more active at night. So that consistency, like you said, shouldn't be, on weekdays because of work, I go to bed at that time, and on weekend I go party and come back home at 4 a.m. and sleep for 4 hours. And that's okay. I'm going to get that sleep later on during the week.
Unfortunately, yes, for the night owl, because it's sort of like that's when we're at our best. I mean, there are studies that show we actually there's a level of a performance, like in terms of, there's this really interesting study about leg strength.
Okay.
And I think it was the University of Alberta. And because of the way we're wired, we actually reach this synchronicity in terms of our, in terms of our physiology, and also how our, just basically how we, I'm trying to think of the right word now. Can't remember. I wish I had that study here. But all to say that we're wired in such a way that we get this extra boost of leg strength at around, on average, 9 o'clock at night that nobody else does, regardless of time of day. So in morning lark will never experience this because of the fact that their nervous system, the way it's structured, and their circadian rhythm don't coincide the way it would for a night owl. I should get that study. We should actually talk about that during the night owl episode.
So we will, and just curious to, then we're gonna shift to having maybe some example. I think the best example would probably be, what did you do in your case?
Yeah. So what did I do in my case in terms of being a night owl?
You were telling me as a student, that's when you realized you were not sleeping correctly.
Well, this was my entire life that I wasn't sleeping well, but then it started when I was working. So when I was in my 20s, after university, I started working, and I realized that no, I don't have the energy anymore. And because I could no longer choose my classes, I can't take a night class, I have to go to work at 9, earlier even.
Yeah.
And so but I couldn't go to sleep earlier. So I go to bed earlier. So what I do, right? So I would lie in bed. Doing the most counterproductive thing that you could do is lie in bed to try and see if you could fall asleep. That's the worst thing you can do, actually. I think you're going to ask me a question about that later.
Yeah.
But I did that, and it continued. I didn't know. I didn't have the information, right? And then when I was in my, I'm not going to say the age. Okay, when I was doing my PhD, actually, so I was doing my PhD, I was, at that point, I knew that I had to do something because I had to teach a class at around 8:30, 8:45 in the morning. And I was like, okay, this is not going to work. If I can do a 10 o'clock meeting, long lab meetings, I can do, right? I can I can teach after that. But 8:45, will I even be able to fall asleep? Right? And I would lie in bed and hear the birds singing, and it was the worst. Right? It got to the point where I developed insomnia, and I didn't even hear my alarm clocks ring, because when I finally was able to fall asleep, I was in deep sleep, and I didn't get to the class. All my students were able to get to the class, but not me. That is so bad. So bad. So this is actually a little bit of how I met, how I got into sleep. So I was at Simon Fraser University, just to let all of you know, this is actually a true story. So I get to the class and no one's there, and the session, and no one's there. And I say, oh crap, what am I going to do? I went down to the research lab and I saw Luc Baudouin, who we'll be having on in a couple of episodes. And I'm like, okay, this just happened, because he saw I was like pretty devastated. And I know devastated sounds like a strong word, but for me it was a continuing pattern in my life where I was like, why can't I wake up? Am I lazy? Am I not committed? I know that's not true, but it was just so hard. And he told me, hey, you know what? I've actually experienced insomnia in the past. So we're not talking about night owls here. It was like not insomnia. And I have developed, I have a theory on how this works, or that can help people. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we started to work on that. And it did help me. His technique, what he developed, actually ended up helping me with the insomnia part, but not entirely with the night owl issue. Because then I started to do research.
Yeah.
The great thing about being in a university environment is you do have access to all this research literature. And I started to read, and I found out about circadian rhythms. And I realized that, as a night owl, I just go to bed later. So what can I do to help myself? I had two choices. Either if I had the power to change my life so I could work and live around my preferred schedule, that would be great. But at the same time, if I can't, then I have to adjust.
Okay.
Right? So this is where I had to then implement extremely important sleep hygiene. So you're asking me about sleep habits. Well, sleep hygiene is essentially a set of practices that you put into place in your life that promotes good sleep. And for all of those people out there who are asking about how do you create that perfect, ideal sleep routine? Well, people have sleep routines. Basically, most people have some sort of sleep routine that they follow, whether they're conscious of it or not. But are you consciously doing something that is good for your sleep, or are you doing something that inadvertently is not serving your sleep and not serving you?
Like
right?
Scrolling on TikTok in your bed.
Right, exactly. So every good bedtime routine should incorporate sleep hygiene, right? And so that's what I did. I started to do two things. One thing was basically dim lights at night.
Okay.
Because, as a night owl, so just in general, we take cues from our environment as triggers that tell us it's time to go to bed. These triggers in our environment actually signal to your brain this little tiny pea-sized cluster of just right here, right behind your optic nerve. Like right here. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's really hard to say sometimes.
I will not repeat that
term. Right? So it's like the SCN, whatever. But essentially that is the conductor of your circadian rhythm and sleep, right? So it triggers the processes that will start sleep onset. And how it does this is it triggers melatonin. So melatonin then gets released, and melatonin is then the trigger that sets everything else in motion, right? So what affects this timing are things like light. So a lot of people now aren't getting enough sleep because they're exposing themselves to a lot of light. It's not just the scrolling, which will overstimulate your brain, you know, with its addictive properties also, right?
Yeah.
But it's just the light itself, because light is a strong indicator to your body that it's either time for you to stay up or to be awake or to go to bed. If we have artificial lighting all over the place, that's not going to be good. So that's what I did. I dimmed the lights at night.
Mm-hmm.
I made sure to wake up earlier to give myself as much sun as I could during the day. The reason for that is not for insomnia, but it was so that I could advance my sleep phase, so I could wake up earlier. This is how important sunlight is to us. It can actually delay or advance, or light. It can delay and advance the time you go to your sleep opportunity when you can actually physically go to bed, right? So that was really important to me as a night owl. We'll get into that more in another episode. But essentially, you're asking me what I did. That's what I did.
Yeah.
Okay. I used candles a whole bunch, because one other thing that is really important is being able to calm yourself down. So back then, what I liked, what I still like are, yes, dim lights, candles, music, anything that will help me to relax. Now, everyone is different. There is no one sleep routine that will work for absolutely everybody. But sleep hygiene, that's consistent.
Okay.
Right? So let's take it back to sleep hygiene. So lights is one thing, keeping your lights dim at night. Another thing is not working in your bedroom, studying in your bedroom, right? So yeah, no more reading papers in the bedroom.
Yeah.
What I would do, I'd be on my desk, right? There's also time management there, learning how to manage your day. So this is not sleep hygiene, but that you have a lot of projects to do, then learning how to manage your time better. So then, in terms of what else did I do? I also worked in terms of temperature. Okay. So this is something that I didn't do back then. It's something that I learned more recently. So essentially, our bodies evolved, again, with the 24-hour day, and we were exposed to the environment more during this evolution process. We didn't have temperature-controlled,
Yes,
rooms.
you had clothing, basically, and that's about it.
A shelter and et cetera. But, you're exposed to the elements much more. At night, what happens with
Gets
temperature?
Colder. Yeah,
right?
It gets colder.
It gets colder. So we've actually evolved to take that as a cue for nighttime. So in terms of my bedroom, I'll drop the temperature. And do you know what, so the ideal temperature for sleeping is around, this seems cold to a lot of people, right? But it's around 16.5 to just under 20 degrees Celsius.
Wow, that's colder than
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are.
Right? 26.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No, actually. So if you, let me put it this way. So if you want to maybe help yourself sleep better, you would keep a cool bedroom and keep it dark, right? So keep it cool and dark. Keep it around 18.5 degrees, or, if that's too cold for you, then around 20 even, just under 20. And then you'll wear your pajamas, and you have your blankets, etc. That's a good sleep environment. Now
that you mention it, you know what? It's true that temperature definitely have an impact, because we know from customer reviews and feedback we have that often this summer, especially people who don't have air conditioning, have a lot more difficulty to adapt to our sleeping surfaces.
Yes.
And there's a bit of education that needs to be done there. I didn't knew that the temperature was going as low as 17, 16 even degrees.
18. Well,
So,
16 is a little low.
yeah, it is.
Right?
It is quite
But,
cold. I mean,
yeah.
if you're in France now, due to the current energy situation, that's where you might end up being. But in our case here, we like to get it cozy. So at least around 20 degrees, so below 2-3 degrees, at least lower than the average temperature you would leave your room during the day.
Yes.
That's interesting.
It's interesting, right? So that was something that I started to implement a little later because I wasn't aware. But I think that's the issue. A lot of people aren't aware of all these basic sleep hygiene tips out there. Another thing that I made sure not to do was to drink a lot of water or, have tea or coffee too late. So do you want me to get into that, like coffee, or do you want to do this now, or is there another episode where you want to do this?
I mean, we're definitely caffeine.
Yeah,
I will definitely touch that on the episode where we're gonna cover more about alcohol, drugs, and all that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's on itself such a big problem in our society.
Yeah.
But just like you said, definitely the water part I didn't knew though, but I kind of realize it.
Yep.
I tend to consume less water because the worst feeling is to being, wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning because you have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it so much, which is one of the reasons I don't drink as much at night. But that's probably also why you're saying water consumption should be reduced.
Exactly. So essentially, I used to like to drink water before bed. That wasn't wise because then you end up going to the washroom. And so yes, I limited that. Although there are some people who say, you know what, I'm dehydrated, I need some water. Okay, fine. If that's the case, then, a small glass of water.
Yeah.
We're not talking liters here, And the best thing to do would then be to regulate or to make sure that you have enough water to drink during the day so that you are hydrated enough by the time you fall asleep to actually sleep, right? Mm-hmm.
So to go back to one thing, if I could recap that, there's definitely, when you talk about sleep hygiene, having a mood that is cozy and that is not as bright as you would experience during daylight, which is, when you think about it, it's just logical, right? We're meant to be sleeping when it's night. So dimming down the light should be a reflex, but we just don't do that. So that's a good one. The second one, when you talk about candle and that, and generally speaking, that makes me think trying to go into that meditative states where you're much more comfortable, relaxed, less stressed. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And I think there's many different ways or apps or techniques that can be used there. And I like the idea of, candles. It could probably be anything that works. And that's where people should try different things to get into that relaxed state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really important. I don't think I really expanded upon that, but we do know that stress delays the onset of sleep. Yeah. So one of the key parts of having a bedtime routine or a sleep routine is actually getting yourself in a state where you're calm enough to go to bed. So for everybody, we have different things that will help us to sleep well. There are certain things. For instance, not to sleep well, but to relax. So meditation is one there. But the thing is, I would say don't wait until the evening to do these relaxation exercises because by that time you've had accumulated the stress throughout the day. So it's about stress management. So here, stress management means earlier during the day, when you need to take a break for yourself. If you need to take time to meditate, then do so. If you want to, for instance, go for a walk, that's been shown to help people, experience nature. If you have nature around you, take advantage of that. That's been shown to help. Music. So, some people like sounds, nature sounds. So those are things that people can do. I like for the reason why I chose candles was because I've always associated candles with something relaxing, and I like scents. I just like to smell things, right? When they smell really good, obviously, but I'm just one of those people, right? So if you have a candle there, I'm going to want to smell it, and that's why I kind of like gravitate towards essential oils, not necessarily because I'll have some people from the scientific community who will say, oh, well, essential oils haven't been proven to work, et cetera, in treating sleep. No, for me, that's not what it's about. So I agree that there's not enough evidence for that. But I just love the smell of essential oils. And I know that they're pure, they're cleaner. And so I like to smell them, right? So there's that aspect of it too. So yes, go ahead, use it. But it's because of the bedtime routine, because it's helping you to relax, right? Likewise, reading is something that people enjoy doing, and that can help. But I also tell people, this is where individual differences come into play. For some people, reading might bore them to death. For other people, like me, I would stay up all night reading a book because it was a page turn. I just read a lot. So I would tell people, if you're that kind of person, don't read. If music is something that, as opposed to calming you down, which, by the way, for most people it does. And they've actually conducted studies where it's been shown that music can help. So there is a study where if you listen to 45 minutes of music before bedtime, that actually helped people fall asleep better. They had better sleep quality too, right? So that can help. But that's in general. If you find that for yourself, music, you're so enthralled by music that it's not helping you, well then, switch it up, try something else. What else? I would say too, in terms of sleep hygiene, one of the things that's important, and this is not a bedtime routine, but it's something that you should implement, is reserving your bedroom for sleep and sex.
Yeah, no, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I think that's where I got lucky, generally speaking. Yeah. I've always associated, since I'm a kid, and I got to thank my mom for that. Bed was a signal to you sleep. You don't do anything else in bed. You don't read stuff. You don't play video games with a console or anything. When you get to bed, you sleep. And still today, there's almost this mechanical association with it, where when I lay down in a bed, I will most likely fall asleep in the next couple of minutes. And I agree that, on the other hand, you associate different objects and you create patterns. So I'm sure so many people, especially nowadays in urban area where we have less space, a bed takes a lot of space, that people unfortunately do so many things in their beds, and that probably impacted the quality of their sleep. So yeah, that I'm actually not surprised that it's something, but it's probably something so many people don't do right.
Right. And, I was lucky in the sense that, I have other rooms to go to, so I mean, if you live in, you're talking about space and in urban areas, there are some cities where space is at such a high premium that it's like in Japan, for instance, Tokyo, it's tiny, right? So you might only have this one area to sleep, work, play, everything. Yeah. What do you do? So, or you might even here in Montreal, you might have like a 1.5 or a studio or a bachelor. What do you do in that case? Well,
this is where I think Murphy beds and habits, like, because if you go in Tokyo or if you go to any crowded city, a bed is something you move. Right? You know, it's not stationary. It doesn't stay there. It's something you pull out when it's time to sleep. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about transforming your space. And it's really, if you were to ask me, for people who've asked me that question, I'm like, well, it's about building association. So if you do transform your space, if you have the option to, from a couch to a bed, just even something so that it doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
Right. That will help you to, first of all, if you do this at night, it becomes part of your sleep routine. Mm-hmm. All of these things that you do consistently every night cue your body that it's time to, cue your brain and body that it's time to go to bed, right? So, that's one thing you can do. I was also telling people that if you have enough space to actually, have a divider, so you have a place for where you eat, put a divider there, or a curtain or something so that you don't see your bed, right? So yeah, when you're in tiny spaces, what can you do for better sleep hygiene, especially in urban areas, right? So I think what you were talking about with the beds and, dividing up your room, compartmentalizing it, that's important, but keep your bed sacred for sleep, right? And that's what I'd say. What else? There's also eating. People ask, is it a midnight snack? Good. Should I make that part of my bedtime routine? No. No.
I was waiting for the answer. No. Damn it.
No, right? They actually, I've explored what different people say, when, or how they answer the question, what is the latest time that I can go to
or eat something before going to bed?
Yeah, exactly. Was the last time that I can eat something before going to sleep? And some people say 2 hours, some people say 3 hours. I'm more inclined to say 3 hours, right? Just because, just 3 hours. But if you're hungry, then it's not good to go to bed on an empty stomach. That can actually keep you up. So if you are hungry, do get something small. And you might actually want to get something small, like a complex carb and protein. So, maybe a whole wheat cracker and almond butter or peanut butter, milk is good. Actually, there are actually studies where they've looked at food and how that certain foods can help you sleep. So interestingly enough, a kiwi.
Really?
Yes. Have yourself a kiwi before sleeping, as your snack before sleeping, right? Before going to bed. And then also another one is tart cherry juice. So tart cherry juice was actually given to participants in a study. And let me see. I wrote it down because I wanted to talk about it. Right. So kiwis and tart cherry juice. So here is something that they did in a study. So they had a serving of 30 milliliters of tart Montmorency cherry juice concentrate. Okay. And it was consumed within 30 minutes of wakening, interestingly enough, in the morning.
Okay.
And 30 minutes before the evening meal on each of the 7-day supplementation periods. I'm just actually reading directly from the study. Okay. Each 30 milliliter serving was estimated to contain the equivalent of approximately 90 to 100 tart cherries. So obviously it was quite a lot, but they did this for 7 days and it actually helped people fall asleep. So, and the reason being that tart cherries tend to have melatonin and is it tryptophan or serotonin? I think it's tryptophan. Or is it just melatonin? But it does definitely have melatonin.
Which directly impacts.
Yes. Yeah. So kiwi also was done. So for a 4-week period, they had volunteers who ate 1 kiwi fruit an hour before bed. So there's your snack,
1
right?
hour.
And so the researchers ended up collecting, conducting the study, and they found that after 4 weeks of kiwi consumption, they actually slept better and on several measures, and they were able to fall asleep better. So there you go. Why? Because kiwi has serotonin.
Thank you, by the way, for that. There's
You're
so
welcome.
many great advice. And one thing I wanted to know is actually two things that I want to ask and validate or debunk.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with the first one.
Okay.
A hot bath or a hot shower a couple hours before going to bed.
It's good.
Okay. Because I was like, is it just me? But if I'm super stressed, I had a big day. I know it sounds cliche, but I'll put a bath bomb, take a bath with some music and just chill. And that helps me. But I was like, maybe it's not a great thing. So a couple hours before, not bad.
Yeah, there is actually a study where, if I remember correctly, it was an hour before bed. What was it? Yeah, it was an hour before going to bed. They had a 10-minute bath or shower, but it was warm, right?
Okay.
Warm bath or warm shower, 10 minutes, an hour before, and people ended up falling asleep better and experiencing better sleep. And I think the reason pretty much is that when you're taking a warm shower, it has to do with how the heat dissipates from your body. So interestingly enough, when you take a warm shower, your core body temperature cools, so it drops. And what did I say about a drop in temperature? Well, there's the external cues, but also internally, when we are sleeping, we have a lower core body temperature than when we're awake. So you're actually priming yourself for a good night's rest if you have an evening shower or bath and it's warm.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for that.
You're very welcome.
The second one is, unfortunately, I'm convinced something everybody experiences at least once in their life. That sentiment when you're in bed, you might have slept for an hour, you might have not been able to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You're tired, but you're in bed and you're just not able to fall asleep.
Yeah.
What should I do? Should I stay in bed? Should I try tricks in bed? Or should I just be like, you know what? I can't sleep. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go do something else. What should I do?
Okay. So I would leave my bed until I'm tired.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually part of cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, which is a treatment that is now, it's a combination of different kinds of practices, sleep hygiene, as well as, there are other things as well, right? And if a person is experiencing insomnia and needs to go for treatment, so we're talking about, it's a medical condition now, right? Yeah. They actually recommend cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia over sleeping pills. That's big. That's the first thing that people will suggest. And part of that is debunking myths that we have about how to sleep well, including staying in bed when we're not tired. So they actually say, get out of bed, go somewhere, go somewhere where you can relax, keep it dim, and do something that will calm you down. And when you feel tired again, go back into bed. Because the last thing you want to do, again, is develop an association like I did, where I stayed in bed and I was looking at the clock, counting down the hours, getting more and more stressed to the point where I developed insomnia.
Yeah, you get anxious going to bed.
Exactly. So you want to keep your bedroom and your bed as calm and stress-free as possible. So if you're not tired and you're looking at the clock, you're doing the opposite of what you need to do. It's much better to leave than to create that association. And then also, you asked, is there something you can do? Well, yes. I mean, let's just say you are in bed. You're having a little bit of trouble falling asleep, but it's not 20 minutes yet. Like I said, 20 minutes is usually 15 minutes to 20 is usually how long it takes the average person to fall asleep who's not sleep deprived, right? So don't be so hard on yourself, know? Like if you don't fall asleep right away. What can you do to help yourself fall asleep? Well, there are a couple of different things. One is if you feel that you're now starting to ruminate, like all these thoughts are going into your brain, you have to do, you have a project to work on, you have, I don't know, an interview. There are so many different things, right, that go through your head, relationship issues. Okay. Well, one thing is to distract yourself. So this is actually something that Luke and I studied. It's actually what he came up with, right? So how about if you imagine different images? So think this way. Imagine that you think of shoe. Just think of a shoe. And then after around 8 seconds, think of plant. Think about plant. Then after 8 seconds, you might think candle.
Okay.
Right? And you keep doing this, and then it will actually, it's been shown to actually help people fall asleep, right? So I actually used it for myself during that period of time when I had insomnia.
Wow.
There are other things as well that you can do. Progressive muscle relaxation is something that has been shown to help people relax. So with progressive muscle relaxation, let's say you pretty much, say you tighten your fist, right? And then you relax it. And then you do the same with your other hand and you relax it. And you do this with other parts of your body as well, from legs to...
I've never tried
Yes.
it. That is something I should give it a try.
Right?
Because I've heard about it.
Yeah.
I've heard also the deep meditation type of thing too, where you try to relax each body part. That helps.
Body
sometimes as well.
scans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So all these could be techniques. So basically it's just if the hamster wheel starts to spin too fast, which often do, think about something else. Distract your mind, find cues and ways. But if it lasts more than half an hour, get out of bed, do something to relax your body, then try again.
Yeah, exactly. And music. Music, sounds, have helped people with that as well. The only issue with sounds, I think it can work for some people, but you now hear of people sleeping with headsets on and the sound, they're listening to white noise or pink noise. And that's...
Is that popular? I even tried gray noise and different things.
Yeah.
I just can't.
So
some people are able to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people like it because it also drowns out the noise outside, right? Coming from outside or from your environment.
If you're in a crowded area.
Yes. Right.
If there's traffic you hear or things like that.
Yes. So in urban areas, that's one of the things that people will like to do, and so, but other people just find it simply relaxing. So for them, that's great, but don't make it too loud or don't do it too off for the entire night because now there are there are hearing issues with listening to white noise. For that length of time, right?
We might cover that in another episode. But Sheryl, thank you so much. So much stuff already. First episode was great. I think I've learned a lot. Hopefully, the audience learn a lot from your advices. One thing we want to do at every show, and again, I invite everybody to leave comments below. Because we're going to take these comments and ideally questions. And Janeth, thank you. If you can give us some questions and I want to answer them. So if you do have questions, like I said, put them in the comments below of this episode. Whether it's on YouTube, I don't think you can comment on Spotify. I'm not aware of it. But contact us by any means necessary and we'll pick some of them and answer them. So what would be the question, Janeth?
So we have one question from Jonathan. It says, why do you feel fatigued 2 days after a night of poor sleep?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, well, it's simply because it takes you a long time to recover from an hour of sleep. it's a rule of thumb is around 4 days, I think. Is it 4 or 5? 4 days to recover from 1 hour of lost sleep. So 2 days, you haven't even recovered yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think also like what I was saying is you don't necessarily, you can still function somehow the next day.
Yep.
But the following one, that's where it hits you like a truck. And everybody can relate to that in our young age. You party hard, you sleep 3 hours. The day after you're okay, but the following night, it's
an accumulation of not being able to sleep well, because even if you try to make up for that lost sleep, if you want to put it that way, lost sleep the next night, it's still not enough. So you're trying to capture, you're sort of like the train has left the station. You're trying to run after it. And even if you try to do something to help yourself, it only helps a bit. You're still going to end up feeling tired. And also, typically, I don't know if this is the case in this situation, but sometimes people are already sleep deprived. And then they pull an all-nighter, or, maybe not an all-nighter, but like they stay up really, really, really late. So it's just an accumulation, right? So it's sleep debt.
Okay, sleep debt. I like that term. And often it's also associated with alcohol, substance, or poor habits that goes with it. So you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. Trust me. You're going to feel it at some point.
Yeah. Oh, yes, the alcohol. Are we talking about that next episode? I guess so, right?
We're actually covering that in a full episode where we talk about everything, alcohol and every substances that can end in including caffeine and everything else. So we're going to talk about that. That's a big deal, I think, for a lot of people out there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the first episode. Like I said, please leave comments below. We would love to answer your questions. And we would love also for you to subscribe. We're doing this for you. And obviously, I'm a bit selfish for myself as well. Thank you so much for all this valuable information. And let's talk next week.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Wake Up Call podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and follow our channel to make sure you don't miss any future episode. Thank you once again. Have an amazing week.